Right. You're on. Go.
All right, welcome guys. I'm glad you guys made it out. Our Living to 100 class. This is can we get the music out? We get to make it fun. No, but this is our favorite class to do because we don't focus as much on diabetes, cancer, heart disease, all those chronic diseases as much as we're focusing on the positive, the fun stuff, living to 100, and looking at cultures around the world that are doing it and doing things differently than we're doing here. So it's fun, it's motivating, and hopefully you guys walk away. Actually, I know you guys will walk away from here with some realistic action steps to better your lives, better the lives of people around you, to keep us all around for a few more years, not just sucking air and pumping blood, but really thriving and enjoying life and doing the things you want to do. So let me just give a hand in welcoming Dr.
Somebody brought me this. It's called brain food. So I won't even tell you guys what's in it. All right. So I want you guys to watch a quick little video, and this will kind of give you, for me, what's really important a lot of times when we start something is to have a contrast. Does that make sense? Like to actually know where we are and kind of where we're going, and that we actually have a choice. And I think I just want to let you guys know that sometimes for me being transparent is really important. But I actually have a condition. It's sexually transmitted, and I got it from birth. So from the moment I was born, I started on. It's a chronic condition, but it's going to happen to all of us too. So you guys also have a sexually transmitted chronic healthcare condition, but it's something that can be actually prevented. Not today or tomorrow, but it can be slowed down, and that's what tonight's about, okay? And so we find that it's also contagious too. So, so let me turn this on here.
What will your last 10 years look like? Will you be quick enough for a game of tag with your grandchild? Strong enough to embrace every moment? Will you grow old with vitality? Or get old with disease? The average Canadian will spend their last 10 years in sickness. Change your future at makehealthlast.ca.
So if you guys found that disturbing, just so you know, that's Canadian statistics. We're 20 years. So it's how you're going to spend, statistically, how you're going to spend the last 20 years of your life. And so that's a choice that we have to make. And I had a quote here that I said, it was from Gandhi. It says, there's a gap between where you are and where you should be, and filling in that gap, you can change the world. And you can not only change your world, but you can change the world of the people around you, your family, your children, your aunts, your uncles, like your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. Filling in that gap of where you are right now as to where you should be it will change the world. And what you have to realize is sometimes it's that pain. There's a place between the truth that we have and the truth that we know, and that's where we find pain. When we know that we should be doing something, but the truth that we've been telling ourselves is different. And so when we start looking at, hopefully this works, where we have this culture shock. And this culture shock is crazy because when we start looking at where we are, we're number one in the United States in infant mortality, we're number one in homicides, we're number one in teenage pregnancies and sexually transmitted diseases, we're number one in HIV prevalence, we're number one in disability, drug-related deaths, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and chronic lung disease. Wow. We're number one in all of these things. And if that doesn't disturb you, one of the things is that I started pulling up some more stats that blew me away. 1.1 billion visits to the doctor. We took 2.3 billion prescriptions last year. 76% of the population now takes a prescription drug in the United States. 40% of people over 60 take 5 medications or more per day. 25% of children are now on a drug for a chronic disease. We take 25 million pills per hour, and every 24 minutes somebody dies as a side effect from a properly prescribed pill. We're ranked last in the world as far as healthy longevity. Our healthcare system has gotten an F. We spend more than the closest 10 countries on health, combined on health. There's a 1 in 300 chance of you dying if you're admitted to a hospital. And the Journal of the American Medical says we're one illness away from bankruptcy. And according to Time magazine, that says why medical bills are killing us, the experts, they see that that there's a markup of about 10,000% on what the true cost at the healthcare centers are actually charging them. So the reason why I say these things is not to just be a downer, but to be real. Right? Yeah. We got to get a right truth on what we're talking about so that we don't have to suffer the pain. And that's what tonight's about. It's about talking about truth. And really I'm going to cover 3 things tonight. Number 1 is we're going to talk about truth and the lies that you guys have been told and really to be clear about those things. Number 2 is we're going to talk about how your body ages. And then we're going to talk about the plan to make sure that we actually don't have to go through these, we don't have to be a statistic like everybody. Okay? So, I just had to throw a cartoon in there because I love this. It says that the top prescription is for your arthritis, and it may cause a heart attack, so the second prescription should prevent a heart attack, and it could damage your liver, and the third should actually prevent liver trouble, but it destroys your spleen, and the fourth protects the spleen. It's been known to eat away at the prostate. The fifth, and that's really what starts to happen, right? Like once somebody starts taking a medication, do they ever, like all of a sudden miraculously heal and get off it? No. It's about minimizing the symptoms there. And a lot of times when, if somebody has, symptoms of pain and suffering in their life and they drink or they take drugs or they take alcohol, does it ever make those problems go away? No, we got to address the cause. And that's what tonight's about. So for me, I got to look at, is this culture working? Is this culture that we're living in right now actually working? And you start looking at, it's filled with depression. 62% of people in the United States have been classified as being depressed right now. Depression, antidepressants are the #1 medication that's growing and growing and growing. Is it filled with disease? Yeah, it's filled with disease. Is it filled with anxiety? Do you know how many people I run into on a daily basis are anxious about just getting up in the morning? Like, we shouldn't be afraid of life. We shouldn't be anxious about life. Is it filled with obesity? We are the most obese nation in the world. And is it filled with illness? Yeah, we're one of the sickest nations in the world. So when we start to look at what our culture is doing, we have to look, do we want to be part of this culture? And that's really, for me, what Maximized Living is about. You have a culture on the outside that is filled with these things, and you have a culture on the inside that is the complete opposite. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get to the world, and we're trying to save 34 million people. We're trying to teach 34 million people these truths so they don't have to suffer the pain. But the beautiful thing about this is, because it's a truth, we're trying to get out there and not only just teach them this truth, but to save so much pain and suffering in the process. So if the culture's not working, then we have a choice. We have a choice, and we can do something about it. And then all of a sudden, now where we are to where we should be is going to start to change. And so what we got to do is we're going to try to figure out if this is possible, because here's the thing. I mean, how many of you guys have thought about the idea of being like, 100 years old, right? Like, yeah, I mean, I have, but for some, there's a little part in the back of your brain that says, oh my gosh, do I really want to be there? It's kind of a little scary, right? Because who do we have as a reference, right? Like, when Roger Bannister ran the 4-minute mile, nobody had ever run the 4-minute mile before. And what ended up happening was that they kept on trying and trying, and once he actually broke that 4-minute mile mark, all of a sudden, boom! Next thing you know, people were breaking it day in and day out. It became a common thing to actually break the 4-minute mile, but until he had done it, nobody else had done it. So what we got to look at who's actually broken that 4-minute mile. So we look at the Abergajans. They have a high level of fitness. I'm going to go over 3 different communities that actually literally live to over 100 years old, commonly, consistently, in amazing health. We start looking at what they have. They have incredible eyesight. None of them, when they were studied, actually wore glasses. Abergajan. It's in Russia. Yeah. So none of them wear glasses. When they were actually studied, when the British physicians went out there, they actually none of them wore glasses. They had great hearing. Their retirement for these people was an unknown concept. Like, most of us, we're like, 64 and a half, 64 and 3/4, 65, boom, now I can start living, right? But so retirement's an unknown concept. They had never at any stage in their life did they actually become sedentary, and they hate being rushed. In their culture, there is no such thing as a deadline.
Wow.
Can you imagine that happening here in the United States, like having no deadlines? Like we go crazy. I mean, I go down to, we go to Mexico and everything's kind of like, hey, like, you know, 45 minutes later dinner, and I'm like up in arms. But here's what we have to look at, and we start looking at these commonalities. You know, they're lacto-vegetarian diet, so they drink milk, and they eat mostly vegetarian products. Now, when we talk about the milk that they get is different than the milk that we get, okay? They're from different cows. They're not pasteurized. It's not homogenized. There's no hormones in there. This is actually the stuff that people ate for generations before we had this great idea to totally destroy the milk and then mass produce it.
Wow.
They eat very light meat. It's only fresh meat. There's nothing that comes out of the freezer because they don't have freezers. Their meat is, they don't have to look for grass-fed beef because all of their meat is actually grass-fed there. Their vegetables are almost always eaten raw. Overeating is considered, check this out, socially inappropriate. Can you imagine going over to somebody's house and being socially inappropriate by not eating everything on your plate? I mean, by eating everything in your plate. I mean, it's just the opposite of where we are. Nuts are a major source of the fat in their diet, as opposed to, ice cream or, some of the things that we like to think that we need to have. But here's the question for you. Would you trade everything that you know right now to be able to live to over 100 consistently and be able to have an amazing life for those 100 years? And that's a choice that you have to make. When we look at from the Hunza Valley, normal blood pressure, cholesterol, EKGs, there is absolutely no signs of heart disease in this population. What they do is they eat a lot of flaxseed meal, which is a high omega-3 concentration. They have a largely raw diet. They eat some whole grains, mostly flax, fruits and vegetables there. Very little animal products, about 1% animal products. And the animal products that they do eat are grass-fed. They have, the seniors typically, once again, you start to see this commonality, 20/20 vision, no tooth decay, no bone disease. And when they start looking at the ancient populations, they actually find that these ancient populations that they just miraculously find, they have no heart disease, they have no tooth decay, except recently they did a study on some of the mummies. Did you guys read about the studies on the mummies where they had a lot of heart disease? And one of the reasons why they had heart disease, guess what happens if you're a mummy? You have to be really rich, right? You really don't have to do anything when you're a mummy. You're not out there building a pyramid. You're watching people build them for you to be able to be buried in at an early age. Well, what they found was the mummies was the first generation, those ancient Egyptians was the first generation that actually had heart disease when they start looking at them there. By the way, well, that didn't work out really well. Is anybody having vision problems? There we go. Now that I made that impact there, there we go, from Bill Camera. High cardiovascular fitness, they live up in the mountains. Their exercise is living, right? We actually have to go exercise because it's to make it a part of our life rather than living with exercise. They have incredible muscle tone, incredibly healthy bones. There's no such thing as osteoporosis in these populations, and there's no crime or suicide. Very little animal products, once again, mostly entirely vegetarian type diets. And so we start to see the commonalities between these populations, and they have a couple things. They move right, they eat right, they think right, they love right, they have very little toxicity. And those are some of the big, that's what it takes for us to get to 100 years old. So here's the plan. And so I just have to have you guys understand, there was a plan in place before you were born, right? It wasn't like you were born and you're trying to figure this thing out. There was a plan in place before you were born. And what the plan says, according to Harvard, is that you're supposed to not even start to age until you're 120 years old. You're not even supposed to start aging until you're 120 years old. That's what we're intended for. I had a great Uncle Bob, and I've talked to you guys about this before. I did like an Ancestry.com thing, and I was able to track my family all the way back to before the Revolutionary War. Not one Osborne man in my direct lineage had ever died before the age of 80, except for the ones that had died in war, and except for my grandfather, and every single man on the Osborne family had died before the age of 60 since then, from heart disease and cancer and diabetes and all these other things. So I'm going to buck the trend on this just so you guys know. So don't alter your appointment schedule. I'll be around. But so what we have to do is what we need to do is start having a new truth. We need to have starting a new truth, because the new truth is saying, look, our life expectancy is huge. We have our life expectancy now, we're looking at actually living to 150 years old. The first 150-year-old people have actually been born. And who are those people? And there's a difference between what we call life expectancy. So your life expectancy is, you can live a certain length of time, and then, if you, the average life expectancy is, 79 years old for a man, I think 82 years old for a woman. Or lifespan, when we increase the span of our life by making simple changes there. And it all comes down to this. It all comes down to genes, right? So my genes that I have right now are the exact same genes that my dad had for the most part, and the same genes his dad had and his dad had. I mean, if you look at, there's never been an animal population in the world that almost within a few generations has completely decimated itself and completely imploded other than the human race. So we've never had, like, if you look at like the bald eagles, it wasn't that the bald eagles all of a sudden got bad DNA. It was because the bald eagles were exposed, their environment changed around them. Does that make sense? They were exposed to DDT and things like that. It wasn't all of a sudden that the fish in Michigan all of a sudden had bad DNA and something happened. It was the toxins and the pollutants. It was their environment that changed them. And so when we look at like what they call the Danish twin study, what they found was is only 10% of all the twins that were out there had similar healthcare conditions. They found that 90% of aging was actually due to our lifestyle. And when that happens, that actually gives us power. That allows us to know that we're actually in control, because we have choice. That's one of the big things that we were given. We were given free will. We were given a choice to be able to make decisions in our life. And so what they look at is, and what's amazing about this is, I'm going to explain to you guys about epigenetics. I'm going to explain to you guys about your genes and how that works, and I'm going to make it in 10 minutes or 5 minutes or less, okay? I'm going to take like 10 years of learning, and I'm going to make it in 5 minutes or less. You ready? Yes. So here's how it works. Your genes that you have right now, the same cells that you were born with are the same cells that you're going to have for the rest of your life. You have a type of cell called a stem cell. That stem cell is what creates your genes. So if it creates your cells, if you take a stem cell and you put it in, you can take the stem cell and you can put it in 3 different mediums. You can put it in, and what that stem cell will do is it will turn into muscle, it'll turn into fat, or it'll turn into bone. It can turn into the skin on your eye, or it can turn into the skin on your hand. It can turn into a heart muscle or a lung muscle. What the important point to understand is depending on the environment that stem cell is in, it'll change into a different type of cell, okay? So every single day our bodies are breaking down. Every single day our bodies are regenerating. Every 8 years we get a brand new body. The only way that happens is those stem cells are going to replicate, and the way that they replicate is based on the environment that they find themselves in. They can take a stem cell that's for your brain and they can stick it into a bone, and that brain stem cell will actually turn into bone. How interesting is that? They can take a stem cell that's supposed to go for your heart, and they'll put it into like a damaged part of somebody's brain, and not only will it turn into a brain cell, but it'll turn into the specific type of brain cell that your body needs for the area that's damaged. It's that specialized and that amazing. What happens is every single day our bodies are breaking down, and the way that those stem cells have a very specific lifespan. They estimate that they can replicate themselves about 50 times in their lifetime. Okay? So the quicker you break down your cells, and the quicker you damage your cells, the more often that those stem cells have to actually replicate themselves. The more they replicate themselves, it basically has think of it like your DNA being like a shoelace, okay? And on the end of your shoelace, it has those little plastic tips. So every time you replicate it, you cut a little bit of that plastic tip off. And when you cut that plastic tip off, what happens is it gets a little bit shorter. And eventually you'll get to a point where there's no plastic tip, and then it starts to fray. And that's where we get mutations and damage and cancers and all kinds of crazy stuff there. So the beautiful thing is that what we find is that our number one goal is to stop those cells from dying at such a fast rate. The second thing is what do we have to do to change those telomeres, those little plastic tips? And that's what we're going to be talking about. So how this works is that every single day, the only way that your body knows what's happening is through your nervous system. A signal comes in from the environment. Does anybody feel the air conditioning in here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the only reason why you feel that is because your nervous system is picking up that information. Because it's able to pick up that information, it's causing constriction of your blood vessels so you can stay warm. It's changing your physiology right now. So if we moved you to, I don't know, somewhere like Canada, where it's cold right now and there's snow up to the top of people's houses, it's freezing, eventually your DNA would start to change and mutate to be able to adapt to that environment. Okay? So the only way that your internal environment changes is based on how your nervous system perceives that. So a signal comes from the environment. It's not the gene that expresses itself, but it's the nervous system, a signal coming in that tells it how to express. It activates that gene, and the brain is the interface between your internal environment and the external world. So that's why we look so, like we put so much attention on the nervous system, because it's the interface between your genetic expression. Everything about you, who you are, how your body replicates, is based, oh, my goodness gracious.
Yeah, way to do.
And that's what happens when you have an interference in the nervous system. Your external environment doesn't perceive itself. So what happens is that all of a sudden, as those information comes in, it gets perceived by the nervous system. The brain controls that internal environment, and then it sends those messages out every single day to 76 trillion cells that you guys have in your body. Now, 76 trillion cells, you've heard me say this before, but it's amazing to me. It's a mile-long beach, 25 yards high, 25 yards wide. That's the number of cells that you have in your body. Each grain of sand is in that beach. Like, that's what your nervous system has to control each and every single day there. What's really kind of cool is this came out in what they call trends in neuroscience, and they found that lifespan is determined by environmental and genetic influence. But they found that it's not just not the environment, but it's how your body's able to perceive the environment. So each of us can have the same environment that we're living in, but if somebody's nervous system is interfered with, how their body actually perceives that external world, that external environment, could either be distorted or appropriate. The truth could be different for one person than the other person, and that person's whose ability to perceive their outside world can be distorted, and that's where they start having pain. And that's why this nervous system is so incredibly important. I mean, it's when people die, it's not because their heart shuts down. It's because their brain shuts down. Okay? That is death. It's not our heart death, it's brain death. I mean, that's when our brain stops, our ability to perceive the world, respond to it, react to it disappears. So that's why we have the 5 essentials. And I'm going to simplify it. I was trying to figure out, because it sounds kind of formal. So from now on, I'm going to call essential number 1 is going to be called chill. Okay, just chill.
I like that.
Essential number 2 is going to be called live. Essential number 3 is just eat good stuff. Essential number 4 is get off the couch. And essential number 5 is like avoid the bad stuff. Simple enough, right? So just chill, live, eat good stuff, get off the couch, and avoid the bad stuff. That's all it takes. And so I actually have a special guest tonight. And this is somebody not only has known me since before I was born, but she is somebody for me who embodies all of these things. And I just want to introduce you guys to her. As a human being, she's just amazing. But as an example of what we can aspire to give you guys a new truth of what is possible in your lives and what life should be like, she does all of the 5 essentials. And I was just talking to her the other day, and I'm like, I have to get her up. So I'm going to have Jane come on up here for a second. So. I'm going to kind of interview you a little bit here. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you, do you mind if we talk about age at all?
No.
Okay, when's your birthday?
August 20th.
And what are you going to be?
90.
You're going to be 90?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
So, who wants to be 90 like this? Okay. Number 2, I want you to kind of tell them what your typical day is like. What kind of things do you do?
Well, I get up at 7:30 and I go for a walk to breakfast because I like to get out. Cheap of the day is not. And then I'm an artist. So luckily I have people that want to see my work. So I have things I have to think about. But I also belong to the senior center where there's activity. and I belong to the church, my book club, and I do, I have been doing line dancing, which is very good. I mean, you know, if you burn, you can go through, and we have a pool, so I do water exercises. But it isn't open yet, but it's open, so I continue to do that.
So let me ask you a question. As far as Max Mind, like, what's your kind of your philosophy of life?
Well, I really, I did lose my husband last year, so that was difficult. And so, and then I had to realize I had to get out, you know, to stay home. And I was very sad without. So I just pushed myself out to get involved. And I know you would like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
what about now? As far as like where we're talking about life, how long have you been getting adjusted for? Getting adjusted for?
well, I have been interested in chiropractic for most of my life.
Yeah.
And I had vertigo. And so I went to, I decided to take a class in holistic health. And then I took transcendental meditation. And then I changed a lot. And I decided my parents, I had heart disease in my family. So I gave up smoking, which was very difficult. I really did enjoy it, you know. I mean, so I took the piano. When I gave up smoking, I thought if I put my hand in it, then I would smoke. And so then I enjoyed the piano. So that was a beautiful thing. So it's just the idea that I have changed. I like the maximum living pork very much. There's a frozen banana and spinach and almond milk. And you have that in the morning, and that's very good.
Isn't that
That's a good way
fantastic?
to start. And so I do a lot of soups, and but I think I'm very curious, and so I've taken a lot of class. I went to Santa Clara University on Saturday. They have a class for older people. They're called Usher, and so so I've continued to. I've got to answer.
They actually didn't they excluded everybody that wasn't healthy. Does that make sense? They took anybody that was heavy. They took anybody that had high stress. They took anybody that didn't exercise. They took anybody that had a bad diet and got rid of them from that study. So they only studied healthy people, and they lowered their risk significantly there.
So they found only 40 people?
No. This is their BMI was, but if their BMI was above 40, they got rid of them from the study there. And that's an important thing. So when they study healthy people, it lowers the risk. Imagine what happens when you study sick people, right? And the amazing changes that would actually happen there. So when we also look at successful cultures, we look at, they eat simple. Like they don't have to have, when they have broccoli, it doesn't have to be broccoli with cheese and, all these different things on it with like all these different sauces and salts and this big mush of something. They actually have broccoli, right? And it doesn't have to be steamed until it's dead and, like it's just and baby food. It's actually like crunchy a little bit. So when you start looking at your food choices, try to be simple with them. Eating live food is the best. The more live the foods that you eat are, the better, the more live that you're going to be. Here's a great thing. I might have not have ever said anything about this before, but don't eat sugar. Please stay away. Has anybody ever heard me talk about sugar? No, never. All right. So just now that we're on that topic, and you gave me free rein to say something, I will. So they're coming out with some studies right now, and one of the things, there's a gene called the DAF2 mutation, and what they're finding, and this is really fascinating stuff, they're looking at smaller animals, and the animals that it's hard to study like a human being right now because it's like, okay, let's see if a human being we can double their lifespan. Well, you got to wait like 100 years for that, right? So they look at smaller animals right now, and what they find was on this DAF2 mutation, what would happen is that the animals that have this gene inhibited, okay, when it's inhibited, what their lifespan will actually double in many cases. Now, here's the thing that actually what activates this gene. The receptors are the exact same receptors for insulin and insulin growth factor. So when we have high sugar, it raises our insulin, but it actually allows that gene to express itself, which actually shortens our lifespan. So it's not just about sugar causing inflammation. It's not just about sugar causing all a host of other things that are going on there, and diabetes and heart disease and so on and so forth. Sugar actually binds to the receptors to this gene that could potentially double our lifespan there. So if I've said it a million times, stay away from sugar. There's nothing in sugar that your body needs. And in fact, all it's going to do is it's going to cause pain in our bodies there. Don't overeat. This is a really important thing because when they start studying some of the other cultures, they look like the people on Okinawa, one of the things that they do is they actually have small plates. They actually have small plates when they actually eat. And what they also do, what I think which is amazing, is they actually take their food, they make their dinner, and then they put all the food away, they clean up, and then they actually eat their meal. So they don't go back for seconds. They don't have family style where you feel guilty, you know, like where, okay, there's 4 big things here, I got to keep eating and eating and eating. What they do is they eat the food that they need, and it's not about like filling themselves to the brim. And the people that actually live longest don't have any packaged foods. Eating real foods is huge. Basically, the problem with packaged foods is that 70–80% of them are from GMOs. Our bodies, meaning that genetically modified, our bodies have no idea what to do with genetically modified foods. And we spend $165 billion on fast food. So think of what that's actually not only costing our economy, but costing our families there, those fast foods there. Real foods, just in case anybody didn't know what they were, are the fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, eggs, and meats. There's a difference between meats and what we're going to go into this right now, but the big thing is this: remove bad fats from your diet. So a lot of times people ask me, why don't I just take straight omega-3s all the time? Because here's the problem. If you keep on adding bad fats into your diet, there's not enough omega-3s that I can give you to to fix that ratio there. What we need you to do is we're not supplementing for a bad lifestyle, saying, oh, now I can eat garbage. We supplement because our body needs it, and we change our lifestyle around that. So when we look at removing bad fats, we got to remove the bad oils, the vegetable oils, all the rancid oils that are out there. That's in the green book there. By adding good fats in there, like coconut and avocados. And when we look at the grass-fed meats, this is a huge thing. This is, if you're going to change one single thing, just only eat grass-fed, organic, free-range, like healthy meats. Because if that animal's sick, guess what happens to you? You get sick. Sometimes or every time. Every time. Take a look around you. Like, I mean, when we moved off the farm, that's when we started getting a lot of these chronic diseases there. So change the meat that we eat. And remove sugars from our diet. I mean, we consume 27 teaspoons of sugar. Our body can only handle about a teaspoon of sugar at a time. Anything more, it actually creates an emergency response. Or actually, our body goes into emergency mode. An interesting thing that I was reading about, what they were talking about, when we look at sugar, we think, oh, well, you know, we can have insulin to be able to bring the sugar down. Well, our bodies aren't designed to bring sugar down. Does that make sense? Like when we're hunters and gatherers, everything in our body is designed to raise sugar up. We have 4 hormones that actually raise sugar up. We only have 1 hormone that brings sugar down, and it does a really crappy job of doing it in the first place there. And so really what we need to do is remove all those sugars. The other thing I'm going to always talk to you guys about is vitamin D3. Okay? Vitamin D3, and I'm going to just cut through this. Look at this. If you take vitamin D3, and this is only averaging 500 units, my recommendation for an adult is about 5,000 units. If you're a larger adult, you need to be between 5,000 and 7,000. But basically, it gives you a 7% lower risk of dying. How's that? All you have to do is one simple thing, and that's not even like really enough to actually create like good health. Look at this, lowest vitamin D levels. You have people, they basically they died 9 years earlier. Yes.
How about getting vitamin D from this exposure to sun?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Like, how much time do you spend out? You need to spend about 20 minutes a day, full body exposure. So running down the street naked there. That's what we need to have exposed there, and that's without having like suntan lotions on, without having shirts on or hats on there. So 97% of the people in the United States are estimated to be vitamin D deficient. And yes.
Also without sunglasses.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Because our bodies, like when we wear sunglasses, our bodies don't produce vitamin D in the same way too.
Can you overdose?
What's that?
Can you overdose?
It's really hard to overdose on D3. I actually had a mother that didn't read the directions or didn't listen to me, and what she was doing is like we had the vitamin D droppers out there for children, and she was giving her daughter for about 6 months 26. It was like an infant. She was like really small, 26 units a day for 6 months, and her vitamin D levels were about 80. So, I mean, like, it's really hard to overdose. They use it for cancer patients in the hundreds of thousands of units. Yes?
Back in the 1920s, they were giving people 9 grams of vitamin D in hospitals.
Yeah.
Cleaned out the hospitals. They discontinued vitamin D in the whole state, I mean in the whole nation. And there was a big uproar, so they brought it back. When they brought it back in international units. Bigger numbers, a lot less.
There you go. So, I mean, but the basic thing is that it's just, you know, vitamin D is huge. You look at, but the big thing I need you guys to understand, they basically, when people supplement with vitamin D and they look at their telomere length, remember the telomeres are the rate at which you're aging. They found that people that supplement on vitamin D, they basically have an extra 5 years on their telomeres, meaning that their cells are going to be replicating healthy cells for an extra 5 years of their life. It's something that's so profound that when they start looking at, even if we're looking at just trying to make it to avoid chronic diseases, nearly 2.5 times the risk of heart attack. So if people actually were deficient in vitamin D, they have almost 2.5 times. That's not 2.5%, that's 250% greater risk of having a heart attack than people that had normal vitamin D levels. And low vitamin D levels, well, when they start looking at it as far as heart failure and stroke and their heart attack in another study, they found that you actually increase your risk when you're by 62%. When you're deficient. So we're talking, this is a major thing. This is something everybody every day has to have. In fact, it's one of the things that I call the health trinity. You have your vitamin D, your omegas, and your exercise. Those are the things that most people don't realize what a profound effect that it'll have on you. And in fact, when we look at the successful cultures, they actually live in mountain regions, so their life is exercise. So one of the things that I have challenges with is because we're so busy, most of us forget to exercise, right? But we have to incorporate exercise in our life. We just have to maybe go for a walk to the store sometimes, or maybe just like we actually have to find out how we can exercise. All activity, what they found is that the exercise had to be high intensity. It wasn't that these Villa Camerons were like walking down a sidewalk. They were walking up and down like mountains there. We also look at they exercised all day. They never sat around. They always worked hard, and they had no concept of retirement. So what I want to show you is something that's really profound. And what they find is that this is what they call bending the curve. So bending the curve is from a book called Bending the Curve. And what they did is they looked at people, and they find that people's their muscle, the amount of muscle that they have peaks around 40, somewhere in their mid-40s there. And then they also compared them to people that never exercised. And they looked at they actually, I wouldn't want to be part of that study because they stuck needles into them and sucked out like, muscle. But what they found is that this is the average person that never exercised with the amount of muscle mass that they had. What they found for the people that exercised, their age, the age of their body, the age of their muscles, was equivalent to that of a 70-year-old when they were 90 years old. How huge is that? And what they also found is that the people that exercised and then stopped and brought up exercise, they actually were able to stop that age-related decline. So there's no moment that's actually too late. Like the moment you start exercising is the moment that you get benefits for the rest of your life there. And in fact, this was a study that was done on triathletes. And this was a 40-year-old triathlete, and what you're looking at is his thighs with an MRI. We're actually looking down through his thigh. I mean, this is all muscle right here, and then this is fat. Kind of interesting. Looks like a porterhouse or something, right? So this is a 74-year-old guy that never exercises. And what you see is this is all fat, and this is that muscle, and that muscle, if you don't use it, will atrophy and it'll be replaced by fat. The third one was a 70-year-old triathlete that never exercised, but started exercising in his 50s. And look at the difference there. He started exercising in his 50s because he had heart disease and like a whole host of other problems, so he decided he had to do something. So, is there a difference between the 40-year-old and the 70-year-old? Not really. And that's what's inside of each and every one of us there. This guy just finished his 8th marathon. His wife died when he was 89 years old. He started taking up marathons. He's 100 years old. He just finished his last marathon. She's a nun. She's 84 years old right now. She just completed another Ironman triathlon in Hawaii. She's actually 103. They actually keep on having to put new age categories out there. She's doing the decathlon and the Masters Olympics where with the shot put, she has to do the sprints, she has to do the javelin throw, she has to do the long jump right there. I mean, can you imagine being 103 years old and leaping like that? Now, her leap is not 27 feet, right? You know, I think it was like 4.5 feet, but shoot, that's better than me. So the big thing about this is that exercise is absolutely key. It's one of the 5 factors you have to do it. Another commonality of every single person that ages gracefully is that they exercise not when they have to go to the prom, or not when they have like a reunion of some type, but they exercise for their life to break that stress cycle and to stay fit there. And that's one of the reasons why we have our surge training classes. Get out there, do surge training. We have some crazy things. Everybody can do it. We have everybody from every age there. If you have problems, just do T3 at home. It's about building lean muscle mass. It's not just about exercise. It's about building lean muscle mass, and everybody can do it. Last thing I'm going to talk about is successful culture. And I'm going to kind of skip through this right here because this is what I need you to see. A chemical burden right now, basically they find that there's 300 chemicals right now that are in our environments, that like literally in our environment, every single person's environment, that did not exist before World War II. Now what this means to us, and this is really important, the chemicals that are in our environment are in who also? They're going to be in us. And our environment determines what? How our cells and our DNA express itself. And so as we start to see all these diseases that we never saw before, and we think that, oh my gosh, we were this victim of it, we just magically got cancer. This has been building for years and years and years. And there was a study that sorry, I just surged, so I'm a little sore. There was a study that just came out, and it's entitled Epigenetics, How Our Experiences and Our Life Affect Our Offspring. And what they're finding now is that when we are exposed to something, when we have different stresses, when our cells start expressing themselves, not only do they affect us, but they'll also affect our children. They'll actually go through our DNA, in our cells, and actually affect our children. Not only they're finding that not only do they affect our children, but they affect our children's children. So these changes in our environment that we're seeing right now, you start looking at autism, the new studies that are coming out, they're saying this just didn't happen. This has been building since the 1930s. This has been building for the 1930s, in the 30s when they had all the chemicals and you had mercury as a preservative on everything. Those epigenetic changes were happening until we built this chemical load that was so great that our genes started flipping on us every single day. This is huge. This chemical body burden is one of the most important things that you have to look at because it's in everything from the shampoos that we have, the air that we breathe, everything that we touch, smell, comes into our body there. Everything that we eat, the pesticides on the food, we have to be safer and saner when we start looking at these things. In fact, when they were looking at newborn babies, 287 chemicals were actually found in the umbilical cord blood. This isn't like somebody that's 90 years old. This is a baby that's just born. And in that umbilical cord blood coming from the mother, they found 287 chemicals that were in that blood. And they also found 180 of them cause cancer in humans, and 217 are toxic to our nervous system. This is when we were born. Imagine what happens as we go through life there. The problem is this, is the reason why it's so destructive to our nervous system is that our nerves on the inside of our body, they don't have protection from these chemicals. They weren't designed to be exposed to chemicals inside of our body. It took man to create a chemical to be able to pollute the environment so much so that it actually go into our body and cause destruction there. So what we look at is that now when our nerves are under stress, guess what starts to happen to us? Our nervous system becomes under stress. And how we perceive our environment starts to change. So that's why we look at the chemical toxicity in our environment will affect our nervous system, will affect the way that we perceive our environment, will affect the way that our chemistry starts to get changed, will affect the way that our DNA expresses itself. And what we start to see is that every single thing impacts us there. It's not just the stress. It's not just the good eating. It's not just the exercising. It's not just the healthy nervous system. They all come together, because you can eat right, exercise right, you can do all the right things, but if your nervous system is affected in any way, shape, or form, what it's going to do is it's going to cause a distorted perception of the world, a distorted perception of your environment. Your body's going to over-respond to it. And that's the missing link there. In fact, one of the things they find that causes accelerated breakdown of the DNA in your body is oxidation, is the breakdown as you're exposed to the oxidation from, think of like oxidation being like rust, right? When your body, when steel is exposed to air, it starts to rust. Well, oxidation is the same process that actually, basically it's your DNA rusting away. That's what causes your cells to break down quicker. And what they found was they started looking at people and they started that were getting adjusted, and this is profound. What they found is that people, the serum thiol is a way of looking at the oxidation level, is the ability of your body to repair its own DNA. What they found was that asymptomatic people under chiropractic care had a higher mean serum thiol level than patients that actually had an active disease. What they actually looked at is they looked at people that had been under care for a couple months, and then they compared them to people that had been under care for 1 year to 5 years. And what they found is that their serum, the longer that somebody was under care, as their body came out of stress, as their nervous system was able to perceive the environment, it was able to see that there was damage. It would actually raise the serum thiol levels up, would actually go and then help repair their actual DNA. How profound is that? That's huge. And it had nothing to do with back pain or neck pain. It has everything to do with your life expression, everything to do with who you are. And so really what we need to look at is, I mean, if you're using commercialized cleaning products, ask Teresa. By the way, she's going to hate me because I'm going to say ask Teresa a whole bunch of times. Okay? If you're, ask Teresa. She's got resources there. We have a toxicity makeover on the web where we went over everything on there. It's on our website. There's videos on there. If you have amalgam fillings, if you eat processed food, if you're exposed to mold or mildew, all these things are toxic. San Jose is one of the top 10 most toxic waters in the United States, as far as a public water service there. So if you're drinking tap water, probably might want to make a change. Just a thought. And that's it. Sorry, I won't put this here next time. I just get too excited. And you have stress in your life, yes?
So, does the Brita take the toxins?
Some of it. Yeah, and so one of the things that we want to look at is you want to have as good of a filter as you can. I mean, you can't invest strongly enough in a good filter. Especially, one of the problems is like when you take a shower, and that stuff goes, it gets hot, it opens up the pores on your skin, and then all those toxins that are in the water still go into your body there too. Most of it's like chlorine, so it's hot chlorine gas in there, and so looking at getting a shower filter is a good step, a good water filter there. Those are some like really big steps there, and we have great resources for you on that too. The other thing for me, that's why I always talk about daily detox. That's why it's not called like sometime detox. It's like daily detox, because every single day our bodies are exposed to it, and the rate at which we remove the toxin from our environment is the rate at which we're able to stop that oxidation and that breakdown process there. And obviously the good thing about daily detox is the two-part system, so it takes it out of the cells, but it also takes it out of your body. And that's the big problem. Like a lot of detoxes are maybe they're a colon cleanse or a liver cleanse or a liver flush or something like that. It's just addressing one area. The daily detox primary thing is raising the glutathione levels, which is actually your body's #1 antioxidant. But the problem is your body can't keep up with it these days. Like when they look at people, their glutathione levels are so low because it's being burned out every single day because it's trying to take so many toxins out of our environment there. And so that's why we have to supplement, because we live in a world that's different than what we were created for there. The other thing for me is, look, it comes down to the spine and the nervous system. And that's really the important thing that I need you guys to understand. Like I said, for those of you getting adjusted and working on getting your spine corrected, look, it's not about back pain. It's not about neck pain. It's not about how you feel. It's about how your body's functioning. It's how your body's perceiving the world. That's the big thing I need you to understand. Remember, it's the signals from the environment that go through your nervous system, up to your brain, down to the rest of your body, that regulate the chemistry of your body, that determine your life expression, they determine your genetic expression, how your body's going to be able to actually adapt. And failure to adapt is what we call death, right? And so when we're looking at that, when we look at one of the few things is that, and I always talk about this, look, if you got, you can live a month, 40 days without food. I mean, Jesus did it in the desert. I mean, people do it all the time, right? You can live, you can live a week without water. You can live, 7 minutes without air. But the moment that nervous system stops, that's it. There's nothing. You're dead. And so that's when we look at the primacy of the nervous system. It is the most important thing that we need to be able to address there. So as far as if you're a guest here, really, the main thing for me is look, I got a message to the world that we got to run a mission to be able to change and save lives. We can't change and save lives if we're just eating right, or if we're just exercising, or if we're just thinking positive thoughts about it. We got to do all 5 essentials because all 5 of them are absolutely huge. If your family's having to get checked, my goodness gracious, I have nothing else to say. I can't beg you enough to get your families checked, whether they're here in this office or whether they're in a different country or whether they're in a different state there. And so, just if you're a guest, great. We're going to just pass out little things there that you just put your name down. It's $40 to get checked out. You save a few $100s, but at least you can find out if your nervous system's interfered with, and you can become part of this culture here. That's what I want for you, is to become part of the culture of actually growth. If your family's under care, great. It's fantastic. Keep it up. Keep doing all the things. Keep doing all the exercises. Dr. Jones, the other thing is we have some really cool things happening. We have our community dinner. If you've ever been to the community dinner, it's coming up next April 1st. The other thing that I want to talk about is we have a movie night coming up. And it's called Escape Fire. Escape Fire. This one is going to rock. And so that's April 18th coming up here. So you guys, we were going to do it on the 15th. All the stuff says the 15th, but that's tax day, and we came to a conclusion that nobody does their taxes until the 15th.
Oh, thank you.
So we decided to move it to the 18th there. Dr. Jones, you had something that you wanted to share with them too?
Yeah, so we got a few things here. As far as one thing, if you guys want to reduce toxins in the body there, up front we've got a stack of healthy cleaning recipes, like things like household cleaners, freshener, wood polish, sink scrub, and you could literally eat this stuff and it'd be totally fine. I mean, the floor cleaners, vinegar, water, lead.
He's 97 years old, by the way.
Yeah.
So, that's what he eats. I see him. He's floor cleaner.
So we've got it. This part. So we have a stack of these. So make sure you grab one on the way out there. We have flyers for our movie night coming up, and then we've also got a nutrition webinar coming up as well. It's free. Just here's some really good information there.
If you guys have ever listened to the webinars, it's awesome because it's a great action step. Not only if you sign up for it, then you can listen to it whenever. They'll send you a download link. But also, it's one of those things that you can't learn enough, and it's a different perspective. So make sure that just take the time to get on the webinar, and it's a chance you can sit in your living room and listen to somebody a lot funnier than me.
And also, you guys also have this flyer on your sheet, and our beautiful 90-year young woman said here, getting involved is huge. And so there's a wellness and fitness expo coming up at Bethel Church. I just want to throw that out there for you guys. It's just kind of like just some more resources for you.